Okay, so we might make a start. Welcome to everyone who's joined us for today's information session about particularly about the Bachelor of Biosecurity Science, but we are also talking about the undergraduate certificate of biosecurity science, and I will provide a bit of background into biosecurity. So. Welcome, my name is Mick Blake. I'm the Director of the Biosecurity Centre of Excellence here at Lilydale at Box Hill Institute. And today I am talking about biosecurity science. I will spend a little bit of time at the beginning of this session just talking about, just introducing biosecurity, just more generally, just to give you a bit of a background. I would like to then dive into the course itself, and we'll talk a bit about the Bachelor of Biosecurity Science and the brand new initiative that we have, which is the Undergraduate Certificate of Biosecurity Science. I know we have both domestic and international students interested in today's session, so I will try and talk a little bit to both audiences. Because there's a couple of differences at some points in the in today's session. But welcome. So biosecurity has been a major focus of all of our lives this year. For all the wrong reasons, but it has meant that people do have quite a good understanding of biosecurity. Everyone seems to have become an expert in epidemiology and how we flatten the curve, or how we try and reduce the spread of disease through social distancing, through closing down of borders. So biosecurity has really been at the forefront of all of our minds this particular year. So at the National Biosecurity Statement, Australia's National Biosecurity Statement, says that nature makes Australia unique and biosecurity keeps it that way. And that's quite valid for today's discussion, because Australia's uniqueness is actually under threat at the moment, it's increasingly becoming under threat as the years go on. Probably three key areas that we talk about when we're talking about some of the drivers of risk in biosecurity. Climate change is a major issue. The increasing movement of people and goods, and the greater threat that we're seeing each year from some of the global hotspots. So if I just touch on those briefly. Climate change. In Australia last year, as an example, we saw a very unwelcome impact of climate change on Australia. Last year we had an extreme Indian Ocean dipole, which is a warm spot basically in the Indian Ocean. The impact of that was that in Australia we had incredibly dry conditions, and in Africa they had very wet conditions. So in Northern Africa through India and Nepal, we saw much heavier than usual rainfalls, which led to things like locust plagues, for example. In Australia, we saw incredibly dry conditions. And those dry conditions were really one of the major drivers for the bushfires that we saw right across Australia, absolutely devastating bushfires. Now, the bushfires are terrible in their own right, but the environmental stress of droughts like what we saw last year have a major impact on our biodiversity, on our ecosystems, on our farming systems. And it provides an opportunity for feral animals, for example. As feral cats move back into some of our remote regions, they put further stress onto what is already a highly vulnerable set of ecosystems that have just suffered with drought and fire. Likewise, in the hills in Victoria, for example, we have feral deer, we've got feral brumbies, which are putting enormous stress on some of those ecosystems. So climate change is an incredibly important driver of biosecurity risk that is one of those things that we like to sort of maintain a watch in terms of, you know, what are some of the threats that or what are some of the risks that is causing for our environment and for our agricultural systems. I mentioned the greater movement of people and goods. Every year, year on year, we see an increase in the movement, the movement of people around the world. So greater and greater travel, more and more goods being shipped around the world, and all of that leads to more and more movement or opportunity for the movement of pests and diseases. You know, one of the first things that we saw in coronavirus when countries were trying to control the spread of those diseases is they tried to stop the movement of people. We stopped the movement of people from from other countries into Australia, likewise in other regions around the world. But also we tried to limit the movement of people within Australia. So we had the shutting down of borders interstate. We had the measures put in place to try and stop the movement of people, unnecessary movement of people to work. We put in place social distancing. These are all biosecurity measures that you put in place to try and stop the spread of a disease like COVID. The same sort of measures apply to other diseases. So, for example, you know, if you have an outbreak of foot and mouth, we saw. Oh, I'm sorry for that. We saw a terrible spread of foot and mouth and disease in the United Kingdom, which was started from a small farm in northern UK. It then very quickly spread through the movement of livestock around United Kingdom and caused an enormous amount of damage to the agriculture in the UK. The greater threat through global hotspots. So global hotspots tend to be, from a biosecurity point of view, tend to be areas where you have very high concentrations of people and animals. So, you know, we tend to think of, for example, Africa and some of the regions in Africa where we have high densities of people and often living in concert with wild animals. So bats are, for example, a reservoir of disease, which is commonly behind a lot of particularly nasty diseases. So Ebola, for example, COVID-19. If we follow that back, it probably came from a bat source. So regions where we have high concentrations of people and animals. You know, China has been in the press a lot recently, but it's certainly not limited to the Africa and China, which gets talked about a lot. We have very high concentrations of humans and animals in Europe, in major parts of Europe. Hence the discussion I just had about the spread of foot and mouth that occurred through the UK. But it can pop up anywhere. So, you know, Australia, for example, we've had diseases pop up in Australia. If you have a more dispersed population, if you have greater controls where you can jump on the movement if you can halt the movement of animals quickly, you can greatly control that spread, which is why sometimes those global hotspots are so commonly involved in epidemics or in some cases pandemics. Okay, so there's some of the areas that we look at when we're thinking about how do you protect countries or communities or sections of the industry from the entry and spread of pests and diseases. That's a big part of what we do in biosecurity science. All right, so now I'm going to talk more about the course itself. The Bachelor of Biosecurity course is Bachelor of Biosecurity Science is the main course that we run through the Biosecurity Centre of Excellence. So why study it here? It is the only course of its kind that we run in Australia. This has been very newly developed. It's only 5 years old. it's still extremely relevant to modern food and agricultural production. So this is something that was designed for industry, in concert with industry and government, trying to develop a course which met a skills gap. We tend to run quite small classes, so there is a lot of hands-on work. Our labs are quite small, so we can only really fit about 20 people in our labs. So the classes we run do get dictated by the space that we have available in our labs. So they're quite small classes. So there is very close contact between students and lecturers. And I think as a result of that, we get fabulous feedback from our students, because they develop a very strong cohort within the student group, and very strong linkages between the students and the lecturers, which is really lovely. It is, as I said, a hands-on course. So particularly in second year of the course, students spend a lot of time going out onto farms, into orchards, visiting apiaries, going to infectious disease laboratories, looking at biosecurity control measures which are put in place in these different industries, and comparing and contrasting what works and what doesn't work. Because the idea of this is that students come out of the course knowing the agricultural systems, knowing the environmental systems that they'll be working with, and knowing what sort of biosecurity controls are common across those industries, and how you put those in place in a effective way. So a very hands-on course. The laboratories that we work in, and I'm currently sitting in one of our labs, are purpose-built biosecurity labs. So they were designed with biosecurity in mind when they were developed about 5 years ago, and they are used for the teaching of biosecurity science. So these are customized facilities and very nicely set up for the purposes of training in biosecurity. I want to touch on career pathways or career outcomes from the qualification. Biosecurity is a really is quite a diverse occupation. I know people think of it as being quite constrained, and a lot of people tend to think more of the quarantine side of biosecurity, which is really only a very small part of what's done in biosecurity. As you can see from some of the positions which are there, there's actually quite a spread of roles. So it can be a hands-on type role, looking at outbreaks of trying to work with outbreaks of diseases in orchards, in plants. It could be in feral animal control. It could be more in a desk type job where you're doing risk assessments or policy development. And the nice thing about that is that it provides a pathway for students. So you may come out as a graduate wanting to have something that is more in a lab or in the field, doing hands-on type work. But as you progress in your career, you may want to progress into a more senior role that may be more of a coordination role or a management role. And biosecurity offers that progression. So this is not just a sort of a straight out of school role. This is a career pathway, which I think is really important to consider when you're thinking about what you want to do with the rest of your life. Okay, a few minutes. I just want to talk a little bit about the actual course itself. It is a 3-year degree, the Bachelor of Biosecurity Science. The first year is a fairly generic biological sciences year. So foundation skills in chemistry, in research methods, biology, microbiology, plant and animal anatomies. Second year is when we start looking more at the biosecurity. So we start looking at pest and disease systems in both in plant and animal systems. Where we start looking at human biosecurity and some of the bioterrorism aspects of human biosecurity. Some of the tools that are used are the genetic tools that are used in surveillance of diseases. So second year is much more of a laboratory and field-based year that is very focused on biosecurity. Third year we split. So the first part of third year we are looking again at epidemiology, biostatistics. We're getting into some of the regulations and policies that sit around biosecurity, which is really important if you're going to go and work in a biosecurity space. But the second half of second semester, we do a 2-month industry placement. So by the time you've got to third year as a graduate, as a student, sorry, you will have an understanding of, do you prefer plants, animals? Would you prefer to work in a space that was industry, or are you more interested in a government type role? So I sit down with students towards the beginning of third year to basically go through what are the areas that you are interested in, and then try and get you into a placement that is going to suit the pathway that you would like. So that might be an industry-based one. It might be a government type placement. But we'll sit down and work through that together. And I'm certainly very involved with students as we try and find placements. Something I want to touch on, which is brand new. So this is a course. So this is the first time I've been able to talk about this initiative. It came out of some funding that came from the Australian government, and I'm going to talk about this in two ways, both from a domestic student and from an international student. For domestic students who would like to start study in next semester, so that semester coming up, the government has provided funding, Commonwealth supported places, to support you to do these 4 units, which are going to be packaged up as an undergraduate certificate of biosecurity science. So it's a TEXA accredited qualification in its own right. There'll be 4 subjects. It's a undergraduate certificate qualification. If you are a domestic student and you are if you are a domestic student and you are interested in doing this, you need to contact me straight away. This is we have 20 places, 20 Commonwealth supported places that we're able to provide funding to support students doing these qualifications. They will these units. They will be run as online units, so it will be an online course, and that provides a pathway for international students. So an international student who is interested in doing the biosecurity degree, these are 4 units that we will run as an online as online units, and so they could commence those studies next semester without prior to coming to Australia. So the units themselves are exactly the same as the subjects which are taught within the degree. So an international student who completes these, or domestic student who completes these units and then wants to progress on with the degree would get credit for these 4 units, or however many units they've completed. Okay, so we'll be running this, so we start running this next semester. The Commonwealth supported places for domestic students are only offered for next semester. So I can only offer that benefit, that grant only applies for this coming semester. So if you are a domestic student, make sure you grab my details at the end and contact me regarding the undergraduate certificate. All right, just last slide. I just want to say that we also have a number of other activities which go on through the Biosecurity Centre of Excellence. So we have a number of industry linkages where we run masterclasses, conferences, workshops through the centre. Now, why is this important to students? This provides students with a way to be able to engage with local communities, to try and understand some of the issues which industry is grappling with, things like Queensland fruit fly or incursions of varroa mite in our apiaries, diseases such as myrtle rust, which are affecting some of our native plants, etc. So we run these classes really to try and inform community, but to try and bring industry and community into Box Hill Institute, where students can mingle with industry, and that's just a great networking opportunity for students. All right, that's the end of the presentation. There's now an opportunity for you to put in questions. So if you would like to ask questions, we're just going to run a short how do you apply video, and at the end, and that will give you some time to actually type in some questions, and then I will endeavour to answer those questions at the end of this video.
Ready to apply at Box Hill Institute? The first step is to contact us by calling 1300 Box Hill, submitting an inquiry through our website or via live chat. We're here to answer all your questions and ensure we find a course that's right for you. We will email you an application pack, which will include a link to start your application. The application will take about 30 minutes to complete and submit. Make sure you have your ID and your proof of residency handy, such as your Medicare card or your passport, as you'll need to upload a photo of this to your application. As part of the application pack, you may be required to complete a language literacy numeracy profile. This is to ensure that you meet the entry requirements into the course and for us to support you in your studies. The profile will take you around 90 minutes and must be completed in one sitting. The other one is a pre-training review document, which will ask you questions about your interests, your aspirations, your career goals, and your prior study. Once completed, you will need to upload both documents to your online application. Depending on the course that you're applying for, you may be required to submit extra documents, such as a subject selection form, a workplace declaration form, or an under 18 parent/guardian consent form. You may also be required to watch an online information session as part of your course. This will be discussed with you when you inquire. Once your application has been submitted, you may be required to attend an interview or an audition remotely. We will contact you if you're required to do this. After this, our team will be in touch to book an appointment to finalise your application. This appointment will be conducted over the phone, where we will run you through the pre-training review. This will include timetable information, fees, and student support. Once we have finalised your application, we will email you a conditional letter of offer. You'll need to follow the steps to accept your offer online. To finalise your enrolment, you'll need to make payment. There are several ways to do this, such as a payment plan or VET student loan. We look forward to welcoming you to Box Hill Institute.
Okay, so do we have any questions? Just 1 second while I open this up. Sorry, just show my screen. Sorry. So, could you please give me some examples of the type of industry placement students will do in Year 3? What are their employment prospects on completion of the course? So the sorts of placements which have students have done in the past, we've had students work. So there's an industry group, AusVeg. It's a peak industry body who works for the potato and vegetable industry. So students have done placements at AusVeg, where they were developing biosecurity posters and information packs for growers, and also were visiting, for example, growers to talk about biosecurity extension services. So talking about how growers could implement biosecurity activities. So that's there's been a couple of students who've gone through there. We've had a student work at one of the biosecurity laboratories. So that student was doing laboratory testing relating to biosecurity. We've had someone work in a quarantine facility with Racing Victoria. So that was, they were working with horses that were coming into the country for the spring carnival. So Melbourne Cup and a couple of the other races which are running around that time. So that student was involved in working with the trainers who are coming with those horses in the quarantine facility that the horses were being held. And we've had some students who have been working for the Department of Ag and Water Resources in Canberra, and they were working in. So one was working in cut flowers, doing risk assessments and cut flowers, and another was working in a similar sort of role in plant risk assessments. So a variety of roles, laboratory, in the field, and within the department. So yeah, quite a diverse role, and which was really a reflection of what the students wanted to do. So all of those students, so of my graduates from the last couple of years, all of those students, bar one, is now currently employed in the areas that they wanted to work in, and several of those came out of their placements. Employment prospects are excellent. Most of my graduates have been employed immediately on finishing their studies, so prior to the actual graduation ceremony. As I said, I have one student from last year who has not yet been placed, but yeah, it's exceptionally good prospects, particularly for a science field. A second question here: if you're passionate about climate change, why would you recommend a career in biosecurity? What type of roles are available? So climate change is a big part of, as I said, this is a big driver for biosecurity. So if you are interested in climate change, then biosecurity offers you a way to be able to try and mitigate the impact of biosecurity on our environment, on our plants, on our animals. So our animals, our native flora and fauna are under particular threat from climate change. And when we talk about an animal, when we talk about a native species, for example, being put at risk by climate change, what that usually means is that the environment that they're working in is under stress. And an animal under stress is more prone to diseases, is more prone to constricting environments, so loss of habitat. So these are things which are extremely important when we're considering, sort of how you try and manage those populations, how you try and stop disease from impacting them, how you try and stop things like feral animals from damaging their environment or further reducing their native habitat. Likewise, the same thing applies to our agriculture. So climate change is putting a lot of our farmers under stress. So we're already experiencing impacts of things like incredibly dry years, which put an impact on our farmers, and that impact is both a financial impact, and a financial impact means that farmers will tend to have to take shortcuts and things, and it may lead them to taking shortcuts. It may also mean that their animals or their plants are under stress from changing conditions, which makes them more prone to disease, which makes them more prone to pests and diseases, which we know are there. It also means that the range that some of our pests and diseases can move in becomes greater. So pests, which, things like Queensland fruit fly, which used to be a pest of Queensland, has now been moving further and further south, and indeed we're seeing that in this area last year, or in the last couple of years. It's been really the first time we've seen Queensland fruit fly in Victoria. So a question around what sort of support or assistance a student will receive if studying online. So students who are working online, really, it's very much like a domestic student. Well, a domestic student can be learning online. Students will still be engaging with lecturers. We still have our library resources which are available. You'll still be engaging with your classmates even in an online environment. So we've been running our classes online for this last semester. Obviously, we've had social distancing in place, and we've had to close our labs for a big part of last semester. Whilst we'll be opening our labs up again next semester, and classes will resume in the labs, we will still be running theory-only lectures online. So it's an online course is very much like a face-to-face class, in that you still engage with your lecturer. You still are getting feedback around your work that's submitted through our student web portal. So it's much the same as working in a face-to-face environment. All right, I think we've come to the end of our questions. If there's no, if there's any more questions, type those in now. If not, then I thank you all for attending today. So thank you for joining in. My details are on that final slide. The slides are available as a handout. So you can download the handout from the tab, I understand, on the right-hand side of your screen. And that handout should have my contact details in there. So you're welcome to email me directly or call me, and I will answer any questions that you have about the course. Or if you just want to talk about biosecurity, I'm more than happy to talk about that too. Okay, if that's it, thank you for attending today, and we'll bring this to a close.